Hi, today we are going to talk about dependency injection in Angular. So when you build a component in Angular, you specify all the required dependencies in the constructor of that component. And Angular looks at this component and creates the instance of that dependency internally and injects the dependency into your component. And then you can access this dependency in ng-on-init and ng-on-changes lifecycle hooks. So a couple of questions must have popped up in your mind. So how exactly Angular creates these dependencies and where do it store the instances of these dependencies? You see, like Angular creates these instances, right? So it must be storing in some place. So what is that place and where do these instances reside? So let's talk about that. So Angular uses something called injector. When Angular tries to create an instance of the component by a directive, it looks at the constructor parameter of that component and determines that this component is dependent on that particular service. So it goes to the injector to check if that instance of that service is available or not. If that instance is not available, it tries to create an instance of that service and store that service in the injector. You can imagine injector having a map of key value pairs where key is class name and the value is instance of that class. So next time when Angular asks injector for a dependency, instead of creating it again, it will give the same instance it created before from the map. So now you know that Angular creates an instance if it is not available in the injector. So we have to ask this question, how Angular knows where to look for this class. So you have to tell Angular where the class is, right? That's where providers array comes into picture. So you declare all your providers in the providers array and Angular looks at this array at the time of creating an instance to find the class it needs and to create an instance of. So basically providers array tells Angular how to create an instance. So you must have seen this syntax where you are declaring a service in providers array. This is the shorthand version of this. Providers array takes an object and that object has couple of properties. First property is provide. This is an injection token to identify a service uniquely. Remember we talked about the injector having a map to store the instances of services. This property serves as a key in that map. The second property is use class. This takes a class name as an input. And if you provide this property, Angular will create an instance by calling new on that class name. For example, if you provide user service, Angular at runtime will call new user service to create an instance. This instance is the value in that injector map. So this is how Angular creates an instance and store it in injector. So Angular not only allows you to inject class instances, it also allows you to inject booleans, strings, date, and objects as dependencies. So there are other properties in this providers array which allows you to inject different types of values as dependencies. The third property we have is use value. Let's say you want to provide a string value as a dependency in your application. You can use value property and it will inject this value wherever we specify it as a dependency. The final property is use factory. It takes a function as an input and then returns an object. So you can provide a function, that function should return an object. Now Angular will take this return object and inject it as a dependency wherever we need in our application. So if I summarize, dependency injection has three types of parties: consumer, provider, and an injector. Consumer tells what all the dependencies it needs, and provider tells Angular how to create instances of that dependency or where to find that instances of the dependency. And injector basically is the middleman who stores these instances in a map and injects instances in the constructor of the components or wherever we need that instance. So we basically learned the high level overview of how Angular dependency injection mechanism works. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and keep learning. Bye.